My name is Ricardo Williams, and at 67 years old, I thought I knew what family meant. I spent weeks planning my 70th birthday celebration, hand-picking Maine lobsters and decorating our family home with photos spanning decades. As guests arrived, I kept checking my phone until that text arrived. My son Benjamin would not be coming due to a sudden work emergency. I swallowed my disappointment and smiled for my friends. 3 days later, Benjamin texted asking for $2,850 for his mother-in-law's 70th birthday party. If you're watching this and have ever had a family member take advantage of your generosity, let me know where you're from and click subscribe to join our community of people setting healthy boundaries. The story of my relationship with Benjamin goes back decades, through moments of pride and heartbreak alike. I became a widower 15 years ago when my beloved wife Sandra lost her battle with cancer. The disease took her quickly, leaving me to raise our son Benjamin alone from the age of 17. Those were difficult years, navigating both my grief and helping a teenager process the loss of his mother during those formative years. I worked for the United States Postal Service for 35 years, a job that provided stability but certainly not wealth. When Sandra passed, I picked up every overtime shift available, often working 70-hour weeks. I did this without complaint because I was determined to fulfill the dreams Sandra and I had for Benjamin. The most important of these was funding his college education. Those years blur together in my memory now. I would deliver mail through blizzards and summer heat waves alike, come home to make dinner, help with homework, and then fall into bed exhausted only to repeat it all the next day. Benjamin was a bright student, earning acceptance to a private university in Massachusetts. The tuition was astronomical, nearly $30,000 annually, but I never hesitated. I remortgaged our modest Maine home, depleted my savings, and even sold Sandra's jewelry with the exception of her wedding ring. When Benjamin graduated with honors, the pride I felt watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown made every sacrifice worthwhile. He landed a good entry-level position at a marketing firm in Boston, and I thought my financial support would naturally taper off as he established his independence. I was wrong. The pattern that would define our relationship for decades began shortly after his graduation. First, it was help with the security deposit on his apartment. Then came requests to help with student loan payments, despite our agreement that he would handle those himself. When Benjamin met Tara during his second year at the firm, I was delighted. She seemed ambitious and kind. Their wedding was modest but lovely, and I contributed $15,000 toward it despite my dwindling retirement savings. When they decided to buy their first home 3 years later, Benjamin called asking if I could help with the down payment. I had planned to use that money to finally replace my 15-year-old truck, but family comes first. I contributed $20,000 toward their home purchase, delaying my own needs once again. The requests continued. When Benjamin lost his job during company restructuring, I sent money for 6 months to help with their mortgage. 2 years later, when he switched careers and needed time to establish himself at a new company, I again provided financial support. Each time, there were promises of repayment that never materialized. I noticed a troubling pattern emerging. Benjamin would be attentive and call regularly during times of financial need. Once the crisis passed, communication would dwindle to occasional texts and missed family gatherings. I would often learn about important events in his life through social media rather than direct communication. For my 65th birthday, Benjamin and Tara promised to visit for the weekend. I spent days preparing Benjamin's favorite childhood meals and setting up the guest room with fresh linens. 2 hours before their expected arrival, Benjamin texted that Tara had a migraine and they needed to reschedule. I sat alone that evening with a fridge full of food and an ache in my heart that no painkiller could touch. Despite these disappointments, I continued trying to rebuild our relationship. I suggested monthly dinners at a restaurant halfway between our homes, my treat, of course. Benjamin would attend about half of these, often arriving late and spending much of our limited time together answering work emails on his phone. Still, I treasured these glimpses into his life and the rare updates about my grandchildren, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jack, whom I saw only a few times each year despite living just 90 minutes away. When my 70th birthday approached, I decided to make it a special celebration. Not just because of the milestone age, but because I genuinely wanted to create an opportunity for family healing. I sent invitations to close friends and extended family 6 weeks in advance, personally calling Benjamin to make sure the date worked for their family calendar. He seemed enthusiastic, confirming their attendance immediately. I called again 2 weeks before the event to reconfirm, and Benjamin assured me they had it on their calendar. 1 week before the party, during our brief phone conversation, he mentioned looking forward to the celebration. With these multiple confirmations, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Perhaps this milestone event would mark a new chapter in our relationship. I spent hours looking through photo albums, selecting pictures from throughout Benjamin's childhood to create a special display. I ordered his favorite cake from the local bakery that had made his wedding cake. Most importantly, I felt genuine excitement about having my son and his family present for this meaningful occasion. The day before the party, I texted Benjamin once more. His reply was brief but positive. "See you tomorrow, Dad." Those 4 words gave me such hope. I fell asleep that night with a lightness I hadn't felt in years, looking forward to being surrounded by loved ones, especially my son, as I celebrated 70 years of life. The morning of my 70th birthday dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect late September days in Maine when the air feels crisp and the maple leaves have just begun to show hints of their autumn glory. I woke early, too excited to sleep in despite having been up late finalizing preparations. For this special occasion, I had splurged on Maine lobster, setting aside a portion of my pension check for 3 months to afford enough for all 15 guests. My friend Arthur, a former fisherman, had connected me with his nephew who provided them at a modest discount, but it was still the most expensive meal I had prepared in years. I wanted everything to be perfect. The living room of my modest Cape Cod-style home was transformed with decorations I had painstakingly created by hand. I had mounted dozens of family photos on blue cardstock, Benjamin's favorite color since childhood, creating a timeline of our family history that wrapped around the walls. There were pictures of Benjamin as a toothless kindergartner, awkward preteen, high school graduate, and proud new father. Looking at these images, I felt the familiar bittersweet mixture of pride and longing that had become the backdrop of our relationship. My neighbors, Janet and Bill, arrived early to help with final preparations. Janet arranged a beautiful centerpiece for the dining table, while Bill helped me move furniture to create space for all the guests. As they worked, we reminisced about neighborhood block parties from years past, and their children who had played with Benjamin growing up. "Benjamin must be so excited to celebrate this milestone with you," Janet remarked as she adjusted a vase of fresh autumn flowers. "He confirmed several times," I replied, trying to ignore the small knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Benjamin had confirmed, but experience had taught me that his promises weren't always kept. By 4 o'clock, guests had begun arriving. My cousin Frank and his wife drove up from Portsmouth. Arthur brought his new girlfriend, whom I was meeting for the first time. 3 former Postal Service colleagues arrived together, bearing a humorous card signed by the entire local branch. My sister Elaine, who had flown in from Arizona, was catching up with old friends in the corner of the living room. As 5 o'clock approached, I found myself checking my phone with increasing frequency. The table was set, appetizers were circulating, drinks were being poured, but there was still no sign of Benjamin and his family. I had set aside the head of the table for Benjamin, with special seats prepared for Emma and Jack, complete with their favorite snacks and small gift bags. At 5:30, with dinner preparations reaching their final stages, my phone finally buzzed with a message. My heart sank as I read the text from Benjamin. "Sorry, Dad. Can't make it tonight. Last-minute work emergency requiring immediate attention. Client crisis. We'll make it up to you soon. Happy birthday." I read the message 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. A work emergency on a Saturday evening? It seemed unlikely, but I didn't want to believe my son would simply choose not to attend. Whatever the truth, the empty chairs at my table told their own story. "Is everything all right, Ricardo?" Arthur asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile. "Benjamin can't make it. Work emergency. The words felt hollow as I spoke them. Arthur's eyes reflected what I was feeling. He had known Benjamin since childhood and had witnessed our complicated relationship over the years. "I'm sorry," he said simply, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze. The hardest part was maintaining composure for my other guests. I didn't want my disappointment to cast a shadow over the celebration, so I smiled through dinner, thanked everyone for coming, and pretended not to notice their sympathetic glances toward the empty chairs. The lobster, which I had so carefully selected and prepared, tasted like cardboard in my mouth. As we gathered around for cake, my sister Elaine led everyone in singing Happy Birthday. I made a wish before blowing out the candles, the same wish I had made for years, for healing and genuine connection with my son. Throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of photos on the wall. Benjamin smiling at his high school graduation, Benjamin holding newborn Emma, Benjamin and me fishing at the lake when he was 12. Each image a reminder of what was missing from this important day. The party wound down around 9:30. As I bid farewell to the last guests, Arthur lingered behind, helping me stack plates and gather glasses. "You know, Ricardo," he said carefully as we worked, "there comes a point when we have to look at patterns rather than individual incidents." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Sandra would be proud of the father you've been," he continued, "but she would also want you to take care of yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is establish boundaries." His words stayed with me after he left. I moved through the quiet house, turning off lights and straightening furniture. The contrast between the joyful chaos of hours earlier and the current silence felt particularly acute. I removed the special place cards I had made for Benjamin and his family, tucking them into a drawer instead of discarding them. Some irrational part of me still hoped they might be used someday. Before bed, I found myself sitting in my recliner looking through an old photo album. There was a picture of Sandra holding newborn Benjamin in the hospital, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. Another showed the three of us at the beach. Benjamin, around 5 years old, building a sandcastle while Sandra and I smiled at the camera, our arms around each other. "I've tried my best," I whispered to Sandra's image, "but I don't know what else to do." Sleep came eventually, but it was restless and filled with dreams of empty chairs and unanswered phone calls. I woke the next morning with the weight of disappointment still heavy in my chest, but also with a new question forming in my mind. How long would I continue to enable behavior that caused me such pain? I didn't know then that this question would be put to the test sooner than I expected. 3 days after my birthday celebration, I was still processing the disappointment of Benjamin's absence. I had thrown myself into yard work, tackling the fall garden cleanup that usually stretched across several weeks. Physical labor had always been my preferred method of working through emotional turmoil. I was raking leaves when my phone chimed with a text message. Pulling off my gardening gloves, I saw Benjamin's name on the screen and felt the familiar mixture of hope and anxiety his communications typically triggered. The message read, "Dad, need a favor. Tara's mom turning 70 next month. Planning surprise party. Venue wants $2,850 deposit by tomorrow. Short on cash until next commission check. Can you transfer today? We'll pay back next month." I read the message twice, then a third time, struggling to process what I was seeing. Not a word about missing my birthday, not even an acknowledgement of his absence. Instead, an immediate pivot to asking for money for another 70th birthday celebration, while the leftover cake from mine still sat in my refrigerator. The irony was almost too perfect to be believable. My son had skipped my 70th birthday without a proper explanation or subsequent apology, yet now wanted a substantial sum to celebrate his mother-in-law's same milestone. I sat down heavily on the porch steps, my rake forgotten on the lawn. A mix of emotions swept through me: hurt, disbelief, and finally, a slow-burning anger that I rarely allowed myself to feel toward my son. After several minutes of collecting my thoughts, I typed a response. "Benjamin, I was disappointed not to see you and your family at my birthday dinner on Saturday. Before we discuss this request, could we talk about why you weren't able to make it?" His reply came quickly. "Really busy right now, Dad. Can we discuss the party stuff later? Just need to know if you can send the money today." The dismissiveness of his response stung. My 70th birthday was reduced to party stuff not worthy of immediate attention, while his financial request demanded same-day action. I took a deep breath and responded, "I understand you're busy. This feels like an important conversation to have. When would be a good time to call?" Nearly an hour passed before his next message appeared. "Look, Dad, I already apologized about your birthday. Had an emergency with an important client. These things happen. About the money, can you help out or not? Need to confirm with the venue by tomorrow morning." There was that familiar pattern again. The minimization of my feelings, the vague explanation, and the swift return to his needs. I'd seen this behavior for years but had always found a way to excuse it. Now, with the parallel of the two 70th birthdays laid bare, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Another text from Benjamin arrived. "Dad? Need to know about the money. $2,850. Can send account details." The repeated mention of the exact amount struck me as particularly insensitive. There was no acknowledgement of it being a significant sum, no recognition that I lived on a fixed retirement income, and certainly no genuine gratitude for the countless financial sacrifices I had made over the decades. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying years of similar interactions, seeing clearly for the first time how one-sided our relationship had become. Around 3 a.m, I got up and made tea, then called my friend Thomas, who despite the hour, answered on the third ring. As a retired therapist, Thomas had become my sounding board through many of life's challenges. "I'm sorry to call so late," I began. "Nonsense," Thomas replied, his voice warm despite having clearly been woken up. "What's going on, Ricardo?" I explained the situation, reading Benjamin's texts aloud and sharing my conflicted feelings. Thomas listened without interruption until I had finished. "What would you tell a friend who shared this exact story with you?" he asked, after a thoughtful pause. "I'd tell them they were being taken advantage of," I admitted. "That healthy relationships aren't transactional. And what makes it different when it's you and Benjamin?" His simple question cut through decades of justifications and excuses. "Because he's my son," I said quietly, "and I promised Sandra I would always be there for him." "Being there for someone doesn't mean allowing yourself to be disrespected," Thomas replied gently. "In fact, enabling harmful patterns isn't really being there for them in any meaningful way." We talked until the first hints of dawn appeared through my kitchen window. Thomas suggested I look into resources about financial boundaries in family relationships. After we hung up, I spent the morning researching exactly that, finding article after article that described situations disturbingly similar to mine. By afternoon, I had made my decision. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I would prioritize self-respect over Benjamin's demands. I would not be sending $2,850 for a celebration I wouldn't be invited to, while my own equivalent milestone had been ignored. But simply saying no didn't feel like enough. I wanted to send a message that would clearly communicate how his behavior had affected me. After careful consideration, I logged into my banking app and set up a transfer to Benjamin's account for exactly $1. In the memo line, I wrote, "Congratulations to your mother-in-law." It was petty, perhaps, but after decades of one-way generosity, this small act of rebellion felt necessary. I knew it would anger Benjamin, but for once, I wasn't prioritizing his feelings above my own. The response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of the transfer notification, my phone began ringing with Benjamin's calls. I let them go to voicemail, not yet ready for the confrontation that would inevitably follow. His voicemails escalated from confusion to anger to outright accusations. "Dad, there must be some mistake with the transfer. Are you seriously sending $1 as some kind of statement? Call me back immediately. I can't believe you're being so petty and selfish right now when we really need your help." I turned my phone to silent and sat in my garden, watching goldfinches visit the feeder I had filled that morning. For the first time in years, I was prioritizing my own peace over Benjamin's demands. The feeling was both terrifying and liberating. By evening, My phone had accumulated 23 text messages and 8 voicemails from Benjamin. I had not responded to any of them, needing time to prepare myself for the conversation that would follow. As I fixed a simple dinner, I finally began reading through his texts. The progression was alarming. Benjamin had moved from confusion to anger to outright manipulation within hours. His early messages questioned if I had made a mistake with the transfer amount. When I didn't respond, his tactics shifted dramatically. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" One message read, though I struggled to identify what exactly Benjamin had done for me in recent years. "Remember when I drove you to your colonoscopy last year? I took a day off work for that." This referenced an appointment where he had arrived an hour late, spent the entire time on work calls, and left before I was fully recovered from the anesthesia, leaving a nurse to call Arthur for a ride home. "I guess all those times I helped fix things around your house mean nothing," another text claimed, though I could only recall him reluctantly replacing a light bulb during his last visit 8 months ago. The most recent messages had taken a darker turn. "If this is how you want to play it, maybe we need to reconsider how often the kids visit you. Not sure your influence is what we want for them right now." Using my limited time with my grandchildren as leverage was a new low, one that sent a chill through me despite the warm September evening. As I was reading these messages, a new text arrived from Tara, Benjamin's wife. "Ricardo, I don't know what's going on between you two, but Benjamin is really upset. This party means everything to my mother. She's been through so much this year with her health issues. I thought you of all people would understand family obligations." This was another manipulation tactic. While I had met Benjamin's mother-in-law perhaps 5 times at family gatherings over the years, I knew nothing about any health issues she might be facing. This was clearly designed to trigger guilt. Another text from Benjamin arrived. "We're coming over tomorrow to sort this out in person. This behavior isn't like you, Dad. Mom would be so disappointed in how you're treating family." Invoking Sandra's memory as a weapon against me was the final straw. The mention of them coming over also triggered genuine concern. Benjamin's tone had become increasingly hostile, and the thought of a confrontation in my home made me deeply uncomfortable. That evening, I called my neighbor Arthur to discuss the situation. Arthur had known Benjamin since he was a child and had witnessed our relationship dynamics firsthand over decades. "He's threatening to come over tomorrow," I explained after sharing the text exchanges. "I'm not sure I want him here when he's this angry." Arthur's response was measured but firm. "Ricardo, you have every right to decide who enters your home and when. If you're uncomfortable with this visit, you can set that boundary. But how? Benjamin has a key. He's always had a key." There was a pause before Arthur replied, "Maybe it's time to change the locks." The suggestion initially seemed extreme, but the more I considered Benjamin's escalating hostility, the more reasonable it became. This wasn't about punishing him, but about protecting my physical and emotional safety during a volatile situation. The next morning, I called a local locksmith who had helped when I accidentally locked myself out last winter. He was able to come that afternoon to change all the exterior locks. While he worked, I found myself explaining the situation, feeling a need to justify this decision to a virtual stranger. The locksmith, a grandfatherly man named Paul, nodded understandingly. "Family disputes are the hardest, Mr. Williams. I change locks for these situations more often than you'd think. Sometimes people need physical boundaries until emotional ones can be established." His matter-of-fact approach was oddly comforting. This wasn't some unprecedented action I was taking. It was a reasonable step when communication had broken down. After Paul left, I also contacted a local security company about installing a simple camera system. They had a cancellation and were able to install a doorbell camera and 2 exterior cameras that same day. The unexpected expenses strained my monthly budget, but the peace of mind felt worth every penny. Throughout the day, Benjamin's texts continued, growing increasingly hostile. Tara had joined in with her own messages, some pleading and others accusatory. The most troubling came from Benjamin in the evening. "If you won't help us willingly, maybe we need to start thinking about power of attorney. Dad, your behavior is concerning all of us. Refusing to help family, changing locks. These aren't rational decisions. The implication was clear and frightening. Benjamin was suggesting that my refusal to give him money was a sign of mental decline, one that might justify taking legal control of my affairs. That this thought had emerged so quickly after a single refused request spoke volumes about his true motivations. I spent a restless night, sleeping fitfully and waking at every sound. Around 4 in the morning, I heard a noise outside that sent my heart racing. Checking the new security camera feed on my phone, I saw Benjamin's car idling at the curb. He didn't approach the house but sat there for nearly 20 minutes before driving away. The implicit intimidation in this middle-of-the-night visit was unmistakable. When dawn broke, I ventured outside to check my garden and discovered that the ceramic gnome Sandra had loved had been smashed on the walkway. Several of my prized rose bushes had been trampled as well. Checking the security footage confirmed my suspicions. Benjamin had returned around 5:30, walking through my garden and deliberately damaging property before leaving. This childish act of vandalism should have made me angry, but instead, I felt an overwhelming sadness. What had our relationship become that my son would destroy things I cared about simply because I had refused to give him money? The broken gnome had been Sandra's favorite garden decoration, a whimsical piece she had painted herself at a ceramics class the year before her diagnosis. Benjamin knew its sentimental value, which made the destruction feel particularly cruel. As I carefully gathered the broken pieces, I found myself coming to a difficult realization. The son I had sacrificed so much for over the years was not the person I had believed him to be. The pattern of entitlement and manipulation I had enabled for decades had evolved into something darker, something I could no longer ignore or excuse. When Arthur came by later that morning to check on me, he found me sitting on my porch, the broken pieces of the gnome arranged on a towel as I contemplated whether they could be repaired. "He's coming today," I said quietly. "He texted that they're driving up this afternoon to talk sense into me." Arthur sat beside me, his expression grave. "What do you want to happen when they arrive?" "I want to feel safe in my own home," I replied. "And for the first time in our relationship, I don't think that's possible with Benjamin here." At precisely 2:15 that afternoon, Benjamin's silver SUV pulled into my driveway. The security camera alert chimed on my phone, and I watched as Benjamin and Tara exited the vehicle, their body language tense and purposeful. Benjamin walked directly to the front door while Tara lingered by the car, appearing uncomfortable. I took a deep, steadying breath and moved to the entryway. Decades of parental instinct urged me to open the door, to try to smooth things over as I had countless times before. But Arthur's words from our morning conversation echoed in my mind. "You deserve respect, Ricardo. Don't accept anything less, even from your son." The doorbell rang, followed immediately by the sound of a key trying unsuccessfully to turn in the new lock. Then came the knocking, insistent and loud. "Dad! Open the door. My key isn't working," Benjamin called, his voice carrying clearly through the door. I approached but didn't open it. "Benjamin, I can hear you. Why isn't my key working? And why aren't you opening the door?" The incredulity in his voice suggested he had never considered I might refuse him entry. "I changed the locks yesterday," I explained calmly. "I'm not comfortable with you coming inside right now, given the tone of your recent messages and your behavior last night." There was a momentary silence. Then, "What are you talking about? What behavior?" "The security cameras recorded you in the garden at 5:30 this morning," I said. "They showed you breaking Sandra's gnome and damaging my roses." Another pause. "You have cameras now? Are you spying on us?" "Dad, this is getting weird." His attempt to flip the narrative was so transparent it almost made me laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. "Benjamin, I saw the footage myself. I recognized your jacket, the same one you're wearing now." Tara had approached by this point and was standing beside Benjamin. I could see them both through the security camera feed on my phone. "Ricardo," Tara began, her voice taking on the placating tone one might use with a difficult child. "We're concerned about you. This behavior, changing locks, installing surveillance, accusing Benjamin of vandalism, It's not like you. I have the footage, Tara, I replied simply. And yes, this behavior isn't like me. I've spent years making excuses for Benjamin's actions and prioritizing his needs above my own. That changes today. Benjamin's voice rose, becoming loud enough that I suspected my neighbors could hear. So, this is about the money? You're doing all this because we asked for a loan? After everything we've done for you? This isn't about the money, Benjamin. It's about respect. You missed my 70th birthday without a legitimate reason or proper apology, then immediately asked for a large sum for your mother-in-law's same celebration. When I didn't immediately agree, you escalated to threats and manipulation. Threats? What threats? Benjamin demanded, though we both knew exactly what I meant. You threatened to limit my access to Emma and Jack. You suggested I might need a power of attorney because I wouldn't give you money. You implied I'm mentally unfit because I finally set a boundary. From my window, I could see my neighbor Janet peeking out from her porch, clearly monitoring the situation. Benjamin noticed her too and lowered his voice slightly, though his tone remained hostile. Dad, you're blowing this way out of proportion. We asked for help with a family event. That's what family does. They help each other. And what help have you offered me recently, Benjamin? I asked, the question genuine rather than rhetorical. When have you called just to check how I'm doing? When have you brought the kids by without me specifically requesting it? When have you offered emotional or practical support without expecting something in return? His silence was answer enough. Tara stepped closer to the door. Ricardo, Benjamin's father, please, let's not let money come between family. My mother's party means so much to us. This isn't about the party, Tara. This is about years of one-sided giving. I've reached my limit. Benjamin's voice hardened. If that's how you feel, maybe we need to reconsider our relationship entirely. Maybe it's time to talk about your will and what arrangements you've made for the future. And there it was, the transparent concern for my finances rather than my well-being. In that moment, any doubts I had about my decision evaporated. I think we've said all that needs saying today, I replied, my voice steady despite the churning emotions. I'd like you both to leave now. You can't just ignore us and pretend everything's fine. Benjamin's voice rose again as he began pounding on the door. Open up, Dad. We need to talk about this like adults. I'm asking you to leave my property, I stated firmly. I'm willing to discuss this further when everyone is calmer, but not today and not like this. Benjamin's response was to pound harder on the door. You can't shut me out. This is still my home too. No, Benjamin, it isn't. This is my home, purchased with my money and maintained with my labor. You haven't lived here in over 20 years. I could see on the camera feed that Tara was tugging at Benjamin's arm, seemingly aware that his behavior was inappropriate and potentially observable by neighbors. Let's go, she was saying. This isn't helping. After a final barrage of knocking, Benjamin finally turned away. This isn't over, he called back toward the house. You need help, Dad, whether you realize it or not. I watched through the window as they returned to their car. Benjamin paused to glare at the security camera, raising his middle finger directly toward it before getting into the driver's seat. The childish gesture somehow perfectly encapsulated the emotional maturity level I was dealing with. As their car pulled away, I felt an overwhelming mix of relief, grief, and resolve. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, I had held firm to a boundary despite significant pressure. The experience was both emotionally draining and strangely empowering. I allowed myself a few minutes to sit quietly, processing what had just occurred, before calling Arthur to update him. He offered to come over, but I assured him I was all right and just needed some time alone. Less than 2 hours later, however, my doorbell rang again. Through the camera, I saw not Benjamin but 2 police officers standing on my porch. My heart raced as I opened the door, wondering what possible escalation this represented. "Mr. Ricardo Williams?" asked the older of the 2 officers, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes. "Yes, that's me," I confirmed. "I'm Officer Morales, and this is Officer Jenkins. We received a call from your son requesting a welfare check. He expressed concern about your mental state and decision-making. Do you have a few minutes to speak with us?" So Benjamin had actually called the police, painting me as mentally unstable simply for refusing his financial demands. The realization was both infuriating and deeply saddening. "Of course," I replied, opening the door wider. "Please come in." The officers followed me to the living room, where we sat down. Their manner was professional but compassionate, suggesting they had handled similar family disputes before. "Mr. Williams, your son Benjamin told us you've been acting erratically," Officer Morales began. He mentioned changed locks, new security cameras, and paranoid accusations. "He's concerned about your well-being." I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm and rational. "Officers, I changed my locks yesterday after my son sent threatening messages and was recorded vandalizing my property." I showed them the security footage on my phone of Benjamin in the garden early that morning. "And the reason for the initial dispute?" Officer Jenkins asked. I explained the situation from the beginning. Benjamin missing my 70th birthday, the subsequent demand for money for his mother-in-law's identical celebration, my refusal, and the escalating texts that followed. "So this is primarily a disagreement about money?" Officer Morales clarified. "It's about boundaries," I corrected gently. "My son has a pattern of asking for financial support while offering little emotional support in return. When I finally refused a request, he escalated quickly to suggestions that I'm mentally unfit and threats to restrict access to my grandchildren." I showed them the text messages on my phone, allowing them to scroll through the exchanges from the past few days. As they read, I could see their expressions shift from neutral assessment to understanding. "Mr. Williams, do you have any history of mental health issues or cognitive decline?" Officer Jenkins asked, clearly needing to cover all bases. "No," I replied. "I had my annual physical and cognitive screening 3 months ago with Dr. Patel at Maine Medical. He found me to be in excellent health for my age, both physically and mentally. I can provide his contact information if needed." Officer Morales nodded. "That won't be necessary right now. From what we can see, this appears to be a family disagreement rather than a mental health concern." "My son suggested he might seek power of attorney over my affairs," I added, feeling it important they understand the potential legal aspects. I believe this was primarily motivated by access to my finances rather than genuine concern for my well-being. The officers exchanged a glance before Officer Morales responded. "Mr. Williams, power of attorney is a civil matter, not a criminal one. Based on our interaction with you today, there's absolutely no indication of impaired judgment or decision-making that would support such an action. You appear fully competent to manage your own affairs." Their validation provided significant relief. Benjamin's threats had genuinely concerned me, and having law enforcement affirm my competence felt like an important protection. "We'll be documenting this visit," Officer Jenkins added. "If you continue to experience harassment or threats, please don't hesitate to contact us again." Before leaving, Officer Morales paused at the door. "Family disputes can be the most difficult, Mr. Williams. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unreasonable or unwell. It makes you human." After they left, I sat in my quiet living room, emotionally exhausted, but also strangely peaceful. Benjamin had escalated to involving the police, yet this move had backfired, providing independent verification of my mental competence and documentation of his behavior. I realized this confrontation likely marked a significant turning point in our relationship, one that would have repercussions extending far beyond this immediate dispute. Whether those changes would ultimately lead to healing or further estrangement remained to be seen, but for now, I had stood my ground and been validated in doing so. The days following Benjamin's police welfare check brought a flurry of unexpected developments. The morning after the officer's visit, I discovered that Benjamin had taken our dispute to social media, posting a carefully edited version of events on Facebook. "Heartbroken today. Trying to plan a special celebration for Tara's mother and reached out to my father for help. Instead of support, he's changed his locks and installed surveillance cameras. Worried about his mental state and not sure what to do. Aging parents can be so difficult." The post had garnered dozens of sympathetic comments, mostly from people who had never met me. Benjamin's narrative, casting himself as the concerned son dealing with a difficult elderly parent, was as skillful as it was dishonest. He had omitted every significant detail, missing my birthday, demanding money immediately, threatening access to my grandchildren, vandalizing my property, and involving the police when I refused his demands. I don't maintain an active social media presence, but my niece Jessica called to inform me about the post, outraged on my behalf. "Uncle Ricardo, Benjamin is completely misrepresenting what happened. Do you want me to set the record straight?" I considered her offer, but ultimately declined. "Public family disputes rarely benefit anyone," I told her. "Those who truly know me won't be swayed by Facebook posts." Nevertheless, the social media campaign had its impact. My phone began ringing with calls from extended family members and old friends, some genuinely concerned, and others clearly taking Benjamin's side without hearing mine. My brother-in-law, Marcus, called from Florida, his tone immediately accusatory. "Ricardo, what's this I hear about you refusing to help with a family celebration? That doesn't sound like you." I explained the situation calmly, including all the details Benjamin had conveniently omitted. Marcus fell silent as I concluded my account. "I had no idea," he finally said. "Benjamin made it sound like you'd suddenly become paranoid and hostile. This makes much more sense. Not everyone was as willing to hear my perspective. Benjamin's godmother, Diane, who had been Sandra's close friend, left a scathing voicemail. 'I can't believe you'd put money before family. Sandra would be so disappointed in you.' Her message made clear she had accepted Benjamin's version without question and had no interest in hearing mine. The most unexpected call came from my sister Janet, with whom I've had a complicated relationship since a disagreement over our parents' estate 15 years ago. Despite our past conflicts, Janet's perspective surprised me. "I believe you, Ricardo," she said after I'd explained the situation. "Benjamin called me last year asking for $10,000 for a business investment. When I asked for details, he became evasive and eventually hostile. I didn't give him the money, and he hasn't spoken to me since." Janet's revelation was the first indication that Benjamin's behavior toward me wasn't isolated. He had established a pattern of financial requests from family members, becoming angry when refused. "Have you spoken with others in the family about this?" I asked her. "Yes," Janet replied. "Cousin Frank mentioned Benjamin approached him about a loan 6 months ago, and Aunt Meredith apparently paid for a family vacation for Benjamin's family last summer because he told her they couldn't afford to take the kids to Disney." This information struck me like a physical blow. While I had been making financial sacrifices to support Benjamin, believing his periodic claims of temporary hardship, he had been systematically approaching other family members with similar requests. The calculation involved in this behavior was disturbing. Even more troubling was what I learned through a conversation with Tara's father, Richard. We had met only a handful of times at family gatherings but had always gotten along well. He called me directly, having heard about the conflict from his wife. "Ricardo, I just wanted to check in. This situation sounds difficult." During our conversation, Richard revealed something that confirmed my suspicions about Benjamin's request. "I'm confused about this party they're planning for Elizabeth. We already have a small family dinner arranged at her favorite restaurant. Nothing elaborate, just immediate family. It's what Beth wanted. So there was no expensive venue requiring a $2,850 deposit. The entire premise of Benjamin's urgent request had been fabricated. Have they asked you for money for this celebration?" I inquired carefully. Richard's uncomfortable pause told me everything before he even spoke. They mentioned needing help with some expenses recently. We gave them what we could. The picture becoming clearer was deeply troubling. Benjamin appeared to be soliciting funds from multiple family members simultaneously, using his mother-in-law's birthday as a pretext while planning something much more modest than described. My suspicions were further confirmed when my friend Arthur, who has a nephew working at the local luxury car dealership, mentioned seeing Benjamin looking at new vehicles the previous week. Tim said Benjamin was very interested in that new hybrid SUV they just got in. Mentioned he was expecting a windfall soon that would cover the down payment. The timing aligned perfectly with his request for money from me. The windfall he anticipated was likely the combined contributions from various family members, myself included, all under the guise of his mother-in-law's celebration. These revelations prompted me to take several important steps. First, I scheduled an appointment with my lawyer to review and update my will and advance directives. While I had always intended to leave my modest estate to Benjamin, recent events necessitated reconsidering this arrangement. After careful thought, I decided to establish a trust that would provide for my grandchildren's education while protecting the assets from Benjamin's direct control. I also met with my financial advisor to ensure all my accounts had proper protections in place. She suggested removing Benjamin as my emergency contact and designated financial agent, replacing him with my sister Janet. Unfortunately, this type of situation isn't uncommon, my advisor explained. When adult children demonstrate financial exploitation behaviors, it's essential to establish safeguards. The term financial exploitation was jarring but accurate. Benjamin's behavior had indeed crossed the line from requesting help to manipulation and implicit threats when denied. My physical health began suffering from the stress of the situation. My blood pressure, normally well controlled, spiked significantly during a routine checkup. My doctor prescribed additional medication and recommended stress reduction techniques. Family conflict affects physical health more than most people realize, he advised. Your body is responding to the emotional stress you're experiencing. In search of perspective and support, I joined a local support group for seniors navigating challenging family relationships. The stories shared by others in similar situations were both heartbreaking and oddly comforting. I wasn't alone in experiencing these difficult dynamics with adult children, and hearing how others had established healthy boundaries provided valuable guidance. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I received a formal letter from an attorney representing Benjamin. The document cited concerns about cognitive capacity and requested that I submit to an independent psychological evaluation. The transparent attempt to pathologize my financial boundary setting was both predictable and infuriating. My own lawyer responded with a firmly worded letter outlining the recent police welfare check that had found me fully competent, along with documentation from my physician confirming my cognitive health. She also noted that any further unfounded claims about my mental capacity could potentially constitute elder abuse through emotional distress. Benjamin's legal intimidation tactic quickly faded after this response, but the emotional damage was significant. That my son would attempt to have me declared incompetent simply for refusing a financial demand represented a profound betrayal of our relationship. As these events unfolded, I found myself increasingly isolated from my grandchildren, Emma and Jack. Benjamin had followed through on his threat to restrict access, canceling our planned weekend visit and not responding to my messages asking about the children. This separation from my grandchildren was perhaps the most painful consequence of the entire situation. I sent cards and small gifts to let them know I was thinking of them, but without Benjamin's cooperation, direct contact was impossible. The stress and heartache of recent events had taken a significant toll. After a particularly difficult night of insomnia and anxiety, I made an important decision. I needed distance, both physically and emotionally, to gain perspective and protect my well-being. I called my friend Walter, who owned a small fishing cabin in northern Maine. For years, he had invited me to use the property whenever I needed solitude. I had never taken him up on the offer, always feeling too responsible for managing things at home. Now, the isolated cabin by the lake seemed exactly what I needed. "Stay as long as you want," Walter said when I called. "The fishing is great this time of year, and the nearest neighbor is 2 miles down the road." I packed for a month away, arranging for Arthur to check on my house periodically and collect my mail. Before leaving, I sent Benjamin a brief, factual email informing him I would be away and unreachable by phone for several weeks. I provided my lawyer's contact information for any urgent matters, but made it clear that I needed this time for reflection and healing. As I drove north toward the cabin, watching the suburban landscape give way to dense Maine forests, I felt the tight band of anxiety that had constricted my chest beginning to loosen. Distance from the situation, I hoped, would provide the clarity I needed to determine how to move forward with this fundamentally altered relationship. The month at Walter's fishing cabin transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Removed from the daily stress of conflict with Benjamin, I found space to breathe, reflect, and ultimately, heal. Mornings were spent fishing on the misty lake, afternoons hiking through pine forests or reading books I'd long meant to explore, and evenings sitting by a small fire, watching the stars emerge in the vast northern Maine sky. In this quiet solitude, I began to recognize patterns in my relationship with Benjamin that stretched back decades. My desire to be a good father had gradually morphed into enabling behavior that ultimately served neither of us well. By consistently sacrificing my own needs and boundaries to meet Benjamin's demands, I had inadvertently taught him that such behavior was acceptable. My physical health improved dramatically during this retreat. My blood pressure returned to normal levels without medication adjustments. The persistent headaches that had plagued me for weeks disappeared. I slept soundly for the first time in months, no longer jerking awake with anxiety in the middle of the night. When I returned home after 34 days away, I felt like a different person, grounded in a new understanding of healthy boundaries and self-respect. My house was exactly as I had left it, thanks to Arthur's attentive care. The garden had been tended, mail collected, and everything maintained in good order. Among the stack of mail waiting for me was a handwritten letter from Tara, Benjamin's wife. I opened it with trepidation, unsure what new manipulation or accusation it might contain. Instead, the contents surprised me completely. Dear Ricardo, I'm writing to let you know that Benjamin and I have separated. The events of recent months brought to light issues in our marriage that we can no longer ignore. Benjamin's behavior toward you was a wake-up call for me about patterns in our own relationship. I want to apologize for my role in the hurtful exchanges regarding your birthday and the financial request. While I can't undo what happened, I wanted you to know that I recognize it was wrong. The children miss you and ask about you often. When things settle, I hope we can discuss a way for you to maintain your relationship with them independently of the current situation with Benjamin. The letter continued, revealing that Benjamin's financial difficulties stemmed not from temporary hardship, but from consistently living beyond their means and accumulating significant debt. Tara had apparently discovered credit cards she didn't know existed, and loans taken without her knowledge. This revelation brought sadness rather than vindication. Benjamin's behavior toward me was clearly part of a larger pattern affecting his marriage and financial stability. While I couldn't fix these issues for him, I could maintain compassion while still holding firm to my boundaries. 2 weeks after my return, Benjamin texted asking to meet. After consideration, I agreed to a conversation at a neutral location, a diner halfway between our homes. I arrived early and selected a booth near the back where we could speak privately. When Benjamin entered, I was struck by how tired he looked. The confident, sometimes arrogant demeanor that typically characterized his presence was diminished. He slid into the booth opposite me, making brief eye contact before looking down at the menu. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice lacking its usual assertiveness. "Of course," I replied simply, waiting for him to continue. After ordering coffee, Benjamin launched into what seemed like a prepared statement. I wanted to say I'm sorry about how things escalated. The situation with Tara's mom's birthday got out of hand. I shouldn't have involved the police. I noted the carefully worded apology addressed only the police involvement, not the manipulation, threats, or property damage. It was a beginning, but far from a comprehensive acknowledgement. "I appreciate that," I responded. "It was a difficult situation for everyone." Benjamin nodded, seemingly relieved by my moderate response. Then, in a transition that would have been shocking had it not been so predictable, he shifted topics. "So, I'm in a bit of a tight spot with the separation. Lawyer wants $5,000 retainer. I was hoping you might be able to help out, just until I get back on my feet. Things are really tight right now." And there it was. Despite everything that had transpired, despite the apology he had just offered, Benjamin had arranged this meeting primarily to make another financial request. The realization wasn't even particularly painful anymore, just a confirmation of what I already knew. "Benjamin," I said gently, "I won't be providing financial assistance. I'm happy to support you emotionally through this difficult time. I can help you research affordable legal aid options. I can listen when you need to talk, but our financial relationship needs to change." His expression hardened. "So, that's it? After one disagreement, you're just cutting me off completely?" "This isn't about one disagreement," I explained. "This is about a pattern that's been harmful to both of us. I haven't been helping you by consistently providing money without accountability, and you haven't been building the skills to manage your own finances independently." "I don't need a lecture about financial management," Benjamin snapped, the familiar defensiveness returning. "I need help during a crisis." "I understand you're in a difficult situation," I acknowledged. "If you're interested, I'd be willing to attend family counseling with you to work on rebuilding our relationship. I've found someone who specializes in adult family dynamics." Benjamin scoffed. "Therapy? That's your solution?" "I need actual practical help, not talk sessions." "That is my practical help," I replied steadily. "I'm offering to invest in healing our relationship rather than continuing a pattern that hasn't served either of us well." The conversation deteriorated from there. Benjamin accused me of abandoning him during his greatest need. I maintained my position calmly but firmly. Eventually, he stood up, threw some money on the table for his coffee, and walked out without saying goodbye. I sat in the booth for nearly an hour afterward, processing the interaction and allowing myself to feel the complex emotions it triggered. There was sadness, certainly, but also a quiet pride in having maintained my boundary despite significant pressure. 3 days later, I received a text from Benjamin. "Been thinking about what you said. Maybe you have a point. Not ready for therapy yet, but will consider it. Going to try sorting out finances myself first." It was a small opening, a tiny crack in the defensive wall he had constructed. I responded with encouragement, but without offering financial assistance, reinforcing that I believed in his ability to address his own challenges. Over the following months, our communication remained minimal but gradually shifted in tone. Benjamin's initial hostility gave way to tentative, factual exchanges about practical matters. When he secured a new apartment, he texted to share his address. When I had minor surgery for cataracts, he sent a brief message wishing me a smooth recovery. 4 months after our diner meeting, Benjamin texted asking if I would be willing to meet his children at a local park. "No pressure, just thought they would like to see you," the message read. This simple outreach represented significant progress, and I agreed immediately. Seeing Emma and Jack after such a long separation was profoundly emotional. They ran to me with unrestrained enthusiasm, sharing stories of school and friends as though no time had passed. Benjamin stood at a distance, watching but not interfering. When I caught his eye and nodded in appreciation, he returned the gesture with a slight smile. This gradual thawing continued in small, incremental steps. Benjamin began consulting me on practical matters, asking advice about car repairs or home maintenance rather than immediately requesting money. He mentioned attending a financial management workshop through his employer. These were modest changes but meaningful ones. Our relationship today remains a work in progress. The deep fractures created by decades of unhealthy patterns cannot be repaired quickly or easily. We still have difficult moments and occasional misunderstandings. Benjamin sometimes reverts to old behaviors when stressed, and I sometimes struggle with maintaining firm boundaries without building walls. The most profound changes have occurred within me. I've learned that true parental love includes both support and limits. By allowing Benjamin to experience the natural consequences of his choices while remaining emotionally available, I'm finally providing the kind of parenting he actually needs as an adult. I've also reconnected with parts of myself that were neglected during years of prioritizing Benjamin's demands. I joined a local photography club, rekindling a passion I had set aside decades ago. I volunteer at a literacy program, teaching adult learners to read. These activities have brought new friendships and purpose to my life, beyond my identity as Benjamin's father. The journey from enablement to healthy boundaries has taught me lessons I wish I had learned decades earlier. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional financial support or unlimited access. True love sometimes requires saying no. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for mutual respect and growth. Enabling behavior harms both parties, creating dependency rather than fostering independence. It's never too late to change relationship patterns that aren't working. Forgiveness is possible without returning to harmful dynamics. As I approach my 72nd birthday, I plan a modest celebration with friends. Benjamin has tentatively asked if he might attend with the children. I've welcomed this overture while maintaining realistic expectations about our evolving relationship. The broken ceramic gnome that symbolized our conflict sits on my workbench. I haven't attempted to repair it, instead keeping it as a reminder of both painful lessons and hopeful new beginnings. Some things, once broken, cannot be restored to their original form, but they can be transformed into something new, something that acknowledges the breaks while creating something meaningful from the pieces that remain. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? I'd be interested to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel for more reflections on family relationships and personal growth. Like and share if you know someone who might benefit from hearing that it's never too late to establish healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that true family support means helping others grow, not enabling harmful patterns.